Thank you for listening to 10,000 Worlds, written and read by Weston Gill. That's me. This is part 8. If you're new to the story, you may want to begin back at the beginning. Otherwise, I hope you enjoy. Chapter 71, The Long Wait. Emily had insisted they work smart. She had made Jake and Stephanie sit together for a dozen hours, tracking potential mages. When that hadn't worked, they waited patiently, painfully, for contact information to surface from the people Jake could see when he focused on those with power. When that failed too, Jake had finally explained carefully and more than once that no one, and he meant no one, spent any amount of time speaking their phone numbers aloud or saying their email addresses. The idea died slowly. Emily replaced it with 100 worse ones. Only when Jake looked like he might actually fall asleep sitting upright did she relent and agree that in the morning, finally, they could go look for powered people in person. Jake didn't complain, not about that. He was ready. What he didn't tell either of them, what he was still holding back, was that Ghent was getting harder to watch. Jake could still tune into the detective easily enough, but now Ghent was aware. Not directly, not consciously exactly, just present, like a pressure behind Jake's eyes. Watching Ghent made him nauseous, a low-grade discomfort that crawled under his skin and grew until it bloomed into a quiet headache. The longer Jake lingered, the worse it became. So he stopped lingering. Hours passed without checking in on Ghent at all. Jake found himself increasingly reluctant to even glance in his direction. Something in him knew better. Jake? Emily's voice cut through his thoughts. She sounded like she'd said his name a few times already. He blinked. Yeah? Are you ready? Emily asked. Where are we headed? When he didn't answer right away, she softened. We can wait until later if you're not up for it. No, Jake said too quickly. We're going. All we've done so far is wait, and I'm tired of it. Stephanie glanced between them, hopeful in a way that made Jake feel guilty. She hadn't left the house in days. None of them had. It was wearing them down. Wait, Emily said, halting the momentum. We're not going out without a plan. Jake groaned. Stephanie rolled her eyes. What's the plan then, Em? Jake asked. Emily looked at Stephanie and nodded once. Jake followed the gaze and froze. No, we've been trying that. Her power is useless. It's nothing more than coincidence. She's just lucky. Stephanie's head snapped towards him. What the hell, Jake? No, Emily cut in sharply. We're not channeling her power through yours. We're going to tell me where we're going. We're going to ask her if it feels like a good idea. Jake slumped back in his chair. That's worse than useless. How long is this going to take? Don't pout, Emily said. This is the smart move. She's useless, Em, Jake argued. What the hell, Jake? Stephanie repeated, angrier now. Sorry, Jake muttered. Sorry, Steph. Stephanie looked away, hurt flashing across her face. All right, Emily said, undeterred. Give me an address. Jake closed his eyes, focused, and rattled one off. Emily turned to Stephanie, eyes wide. Anything? Stephanie hesitated, then shrugged. I don't know. Never heard of that street. Don't feel any particular way about it. Emily nodded. Let's try another one. Jake gave a second address. Another pause. I still don't feel anything, Stephanie admitted. I don't think addresses are going to work like that. Emily made them keep going. For more than an hour, Jake started tired and it ended exhausted. Stephanie's hope drained slowly, visibly. Emily never stopped, never let frustration show, stubborn persistence radiating off her like heat. Emily, no, Jake finally said. We'll pick one and we'll go. We're just wasting more time. Emily nodded to Stephanie for backup. Stephanie only shrugged, apologetic. We have to do something, Jake said, standing. We're just sitting on our hands. This is horrible. He reached for the door and stopped. Emily noticed instantly. Stephanie followed her gaze. Jake? Emily asked gently. Something's happening. It's like he trailed off and frowned. Like my attention is being pulled? What does that mean? Emily asked carefully. I don't know. He turned back towards them, eyes unfocused, darting as if tracking things that weren't in the room. Jake, Emily said, fear creeping into her voice. I don't know, Jake shouted suddenly. Thousands of people just became aware of something, and it's spreading. I can feel it. Aware of what? Emily asked. What? Stephanie said at the same time. It's kind of like fear, Jake said slowly, but bigger, like what Kent causes, only everywhere. Hundreds, thousands of people. What do you see? Emily asked carefully. Jake shook his head. Notifications, texts, emails, just a general rush of awareness. What do they say? Jake swallowed, then began reciting, his voice flat and distant. Situation room event logged, classification pending, all personnel accounted for, no further details authorized, photo secure, no injuries. This is not a drill. Do not use public networks. Assume all communications are compromised. Emily and Stephanie stared at each other, shock written plainly on their faces. Jake kept reciting. Jake, Stephanie interrupted. Can you see the president? Emily nodded encouragement. Maybe, Jake said uncertainly. Why is that important? What's a POTUS? That's the president, Emily said. Oh, Jake frowned. Okay. Emily and Stephanie exchanged a look. Can you see him? Emily asked again. Jake hesitated. Who's the president? He blushed, embarrassed. Jake, Emily and Stephanie said together. Chapter 72, In Stride. Let's odd regimen of brutal physical training, combat drills, and sparring had been the best thing to happen to Aaron in a month. He might still be trapped in a coma or a dream, circling endlessly in a nightmare world, but at least now there was some structure that he understood. No one talked about magic, no one talked about power, no one asked him how he was feeling. They worked, and work made sense. Aaron's days followed a rhythm he could trust. He woke, he meditated briefly, guided, simple, and repetitive. He moved through a martial arts form that took nearly an hour, each motion precise and demanding. He ate, he ran, he sparred. If he wasn't sparring, he drilled forms again and again until his muscles shook and his thoughts quieted. They rested when they needed to, they ate when they were hungry, they slept when exhaustion made sleep inevitable. The glowing crystals were constant, their shifting colors painting the caverns in endless light. At first, the brightness made rest difficult. After training began in earnest, after Rylan and Orla had left, Aaron slept like he was dead. He woke sore every morning. He welcomed it. Pain meant here. Pain meant now. Bluet was correcting him, Joe, George, and Caleb, after a round of sparring. Caleb asked too many questions, odd, sideways ones that seemed to matter to everyone except Aaron. Bluet drew Caleb aside to work with him alone. Aaron stood and walked away. George caught up, resting a hand briefly on Aaron's shoulder. Aaron looked back and nodded. Good match, George said easily, matching his stride. Yeah, Aaron replied. You too. They headed toward the makeshift kitchen, 4 tables arranged in an L, sinks and stovetops between them. Aaron slid a prepared meal into an oven without thinking. You seem better, George said carefully. Like you're adjusting? Adjusting? Aaron echoed, a headache already swallowing his mind. The word meant something. He knew that, but the meaning hovered just out of reach, like trying to remember a dream by staring directly at it. The harder he tried, the worse it blurred, and the worse it hurt. Yeah, George said. I wanted to ask you what happened exactly. When? Aaron asked. The room tilted. When Vuet brought you to Earth? Aaron tried to look at George. His vision blurred and shattered. From Aaron's perspective, the world spun and vanished. From George's, Aaron lifted off the ground. Lightning arced from the surrounding crystals into his body, violent and precise. Each strike ended in a sharp popping burst that started slow and multiplied until the sound became continuous. Crystals darkened as they fed him, one, then several, then dozens, until a wide ring around the camp was drained black. George didn't notice the others gathering as he retreated, didn't notice the sudden arrival of mages lining the halls behind them. Aaron vanished in a flood of power, not obscured, replaced entirely, pulsing white silhouette where his body had been. Orla appeared at George's side and dragged him backwards without ceremony. The power didn't touch anyone else, even bending around them towards the source, hovering where Aaron had been. Inside the storm, Aaron was drowning in almost remembering, almost understanding, almost coming to life. Everything was fog, thick, smothering. He hated it with a ferocity that shocked him, hated the blindness, hated the helplessness, hated the sense that truth was right there and utterly unreachable. A voice, his own but sharper, told him to accept it. Fight, it said. Burn it away. The question how barely formed before the answer arrived. Not in words, in understanding. He wasn't surrounded by power. He was power. He inhaled. The explosion that followed was not violent. It was absolute. Light and heat surged outward, annihilating the fog of the shadows. Every barrier he hadn't known was there. Understanding slammed into its place, so completely it felt inevitable, as if he had always known and merely forgotten. He descended slowly to the floor. Power surged again, not outward, but inward, drawing energy from the darkened crystals as far as the eye could see. The caverns went nearly black. Silence fell, so total it felt oppressive. Then, slowly, faint colors returned, dim at first, but alive. Rylan approached after some hesitation once Aaron was visible again. Are you all right? He asked. I am, Aaron replied, surprised by the certainty of it. Understand what you did? I do, Rylan stilled. Aaron continued. I removed the magic Emily placed on me, against to some faint others. Aaron paused, searching for language that didn't exist. They weren't on my body exactly, but in my mind. They existed in the same way as a cancer, tainting me from within. Ryland's reaction was visible, even in the low light. She blinded my mind to things, Aaron continued calmly, his face pinched in pain. I cleared it. So you understand? Rylan asked, and this time there was worry beneath the curiosity. I think so. Aaron did not say what it had taken him to do that. He did not say that for several seconds he held enough power to birth the universe, or 1,000, that he could feel the weight of it, that he could do it again if it was required, and knew with absolute certainty that doing so without intent and purpose would destroy him just as thoroughly as standing on the surface of a star. Some knowledge didn't need to be shared. Some power demanded restraint, and Aaron finally understood both. Ryland stepped back and guided one of the judges to Aaron's side, his hand firm on her shoulder as if anchoring her to the moment. Orla and Vuet ushered the others away, back into the cavern, into the camp, leaving only the quiet weight of what happened. Aaron barely noticed. I thought, his voice cracked, the word collapsing in on itself. He swallowed and tried again. I thought, once I understood what was done to me, it would stop hurting. This is Judge Millar, Rylan introduced. The judge, Millar, knelt in front of him instead of sitting beside him. Her posture was calm and practiced. That's not really how healing works, she said gently. Aaron let out a short, broken laugh. Then how does it work? She hesitated. It takes time. Aaron's eyes unfocused, light traced beneath her skin, structured, deliberate, moving in patterns that felt meaningful in a way he couldn't quite grasp. Not blood, not breath, not a heartbeat, something else. And then the memories hit. Not softly, they tore through him. Emily's voice, steady, certain, pressing down on his thoughts. Forget, she said, and he did. Moments vanished, feelings dulled, decisions erased before he ever realized he'd made them. He remembered her crying too, quietly and alone, the guilt, the fear, the way she held him like she was afraid he might disappear if she let go. That hurt worse. Then his memories shifted. He was 10 years old, a string of lights scavenged from a closet, humming with power in his hands. Emily frozen in the doorway, already understanding more than he did. You don't want this. You shouldn't have this. Forget, she pleaded with him desperately. And he did. She took his hand and pulled him away. The scene fractured again. Their parents shouting. Emily stepping between them, pointing, commanding. Aaron watched as their parents, fell silent mid-breath, bending to the will of a child. There was no humor in it, only violation. Aaron folded forward, a sound tearing out of him that wasn't quite a sob and wasn't quite a scream. Millar's hands were on his shoulders, grounding him, steady and professional. Rylan spoke quietly and urgently. His sister manifested early, exceptionally early, a powerful voice, and without guidance or training. That should not be possible, Millar said in a whisper. Still calm, though something sharp was hidden beneath it. Her eyes never left Aaron. A voice with that strength would have been detected, recruited, trained, controlled. Their world is bound, Rylan explained, tightly, barely above a 1, perhaps a 1.2. He referenced a scale commonly used in Sanctuary, and Millar clearly understood. Her gaze flicked to him, brief but piercing, then returned to Aaron as he moaned, curling inwards on himself. Easy, she murmured, more to Aaron than the situation. Breathe. Stay here. She turned towards the former Shaper. No wielder should have that kind of power on a first-tier world, she continued, more quietly now. Not without consequence. Rylan gestured at the wells around them. They are bound to something great, and it clearly was not without consequence. Millard glanced around, her eyes widening in horror and shock before landing on Rylan with anger and understanding. They are bound to a well? It wasn't truly a question. She knew that Rylan had done it immediately. Aaron's breathing hitched. Another wave of memory surged. Her hands tightened just enough to remind him that she was there. Stay with me, she said firmly. She didn't look at Rylan when she spoke again, but her words were unmistakably for him. Whatever decisions were made here, whatever risks were taken, they have left scars that will not disappear simply because they are understood. Rylan nodded once. He didn't argue. Why? She wondered quietly to herself, not expecting a response, barely aware she had even asked. The Noctium, Rylan said carefully, is not a myth. Millar's jaw tightened. I am not some dull girl from one of your unexplored worlds, Shaper. I am a judge of the 5th trial from Sanctuary. Do not lie to me. It can be induced, Rylan continued, on bound worlds. The Shapers understand how. That got her attention. For a moment she looked at him fully, not angrily, not disbelieving, just assessing. Aaron whimpered, the sound cutting through the tension like a blade. Millar turned back to him immediately, all focus restored. Enough, she said softly. This isn't helping him. She shifted closer, lowering her voice, her presence firm and undeniable. You're safe. You're not going to be commanded any longer. No one is taking anything from you. Just stay with me. Aaron clutched at her sleeve like a drowning man finding a handhold. I can't make it stop, he whimpered. No, she agreed, but I can help you endure it. She looked up at Rylan then, measured, restrained, professional to the core. I will assist him, she said, because he needs it. There was no forgiveness in her voice, no approval, only duty. She helped Aaron to his feet, steadying him as his legs trembled beneath him, and led him away from the camp, through the darkened hallways. Rylan watched them go. For the first time, understanding had not brought relief. It had only made the weight more visible.
Chapter 73, The Full Truth.
Rylan found Vuet in the camp and drew her aside. You ran a dueling circle, he said. Yes, Rylan. Vuet's voice was clipped but steady. They don't understand magic, not even the way children raised with it do. I needed to give them something else to focus on, something they can understand. You taught them martial forms? You made them fight one another? Tell me what I should have done while you were out recruiting your real army, Vuet snapped. I don't know, Vuet, Rylan said, pacing, but not this. Every single one of them has improved, Vuet fired back. Every one. Rylan stopped, drew a slow breath, and closed his eyes. You showed them magic was real, Vuet continued, pacing now herself, her hands cutting the air as she spoke. And they latched onto it like a replacement for everything else. Their world is full of impossible stories. Gods, heroes, beings so powerful, they stop being mortal. What did you expect to happen? Rylan rubbed his face. I never trained anyone with so little understanding of essence or power, Vuet said. What was I supposed to do? Rylan sighed. They will think they are warriors. They are warriors. They are hopeless against even novice shapers, Rylan replied. They aren't, Rye, who had said, softer now. You saw what Aaron just did. He may be the most dangerous of them, but every one of these children has a depth of power that frightens me. Rylan looked at her more carefully then. They will want to fight for their world, Ruet went on. They understand their home better than you or I ever could. It's only their grasp of essence that is lacking, and even then they understand enough to respect it, which will surely get them killed, Rylan said. They are not gods. They are not immortal. They are gods, Ruet said. You made them that way. How are they supposed to see it any differently? We are all mortal. How are they supposed to understand that? No one learns that lesson gently, Ruet replied. You know that better than anyone, Rye. Rylan looked down at the floor. He hated that she was right, hated that recruitment meant casualties, that some of them, maybe many, wouldn't make it to the end of this journey. Why are you surprised? Ruet asked. You recruited an army. She gestured towards the camp. Judges, led by Orla, worked with the Earth students. They would provide training that would rival anything the Shapers themselves might, even if it was brief. I took the backup plan seriously, Ruet continued. I don't want to send them into battle, Rylan admitted. Then stop now. Give up, Ruet said sharply. Because if you think we end the Shapers without violence, we will die. I know, Rylan exhaled. Then act like it, Ruet said. You told me this would be hard from the moment we began. She leaned against a crystal, forcing herself to breathe. I'm sorry, Ruet, Rylan said quietly. Good, she nodded once. And before he could speak again, she continued. Now you're going to tell me everything. Every plan, every contingency. I'm done fighting from the dark. Rylan sighed heavily, bracing himself and pulling them to another world. The essence wells vanished. They stood in a field of tall grass, swaying gently, warm sun, and a steady breeze. Where are we? Ruet asked. My home, Rylan replied. Why? So I can tell you the truth, starting with a story, my story. His voice was sad but steady. The Shapers were once one of many power groups here. Our world was much like Earth. Technology, society, but instead of machines, we had living magic. It stored knowledge, processed information, and helped us understand the world. He looked around, took a deep breath. Wars ended, a false democracy was installed. It was controlled by powerful institutions and individuals. Dissent existed, but it was managed, shamed, neutralized, or made a societal joke if need be. Brett frowned. That sounds common enough, and not entirely a bad thing. Not entirely. And that's the problem, he sighed. They solved hunger, disease, purposelessness. They built a civilization so stable it has lasted thousands of years and spanned more universes than I can count. Wet's voice trembled. My people died for this world? Yes, Rylan said. Yours and countless others. He sat heavily on the ground, laid back, and stared into the sky. This place blinded me. How could something so good require so much evil? Wet waited, staring down at him. I don't know, Rylan continued. I only know they are the same thing. Their rules led to all of this, flooding worlds with essence until reality collapses. The Noctium, Wet whispered. She flinched, remembering the annihilation of her own world. I don't even know if destroying them is good, Rylan admitted. I only know that I can't let this continue. Ruet stepped forward, burning with anger. The Noctium must end, she growled. I'm trying, Rylan said gently, but I promised you the truth. The Shapers span more worlds than we can count. We won't destroy them. I'm trying to stop one branch, one crime. He sat up and stood, facing his friend. They justify it easily. The worlds they harvest are already dying. War, greed, self-destruction. System analysis says they're beyond lost. Gouette shook her head. No, she said firmly. But even as she said it, she knew it was a lie. Her head spun with her own world societies, nations, organizations with much more power than any small council of men should ever possess. Endless wars of her people fighting against one another across the invisible lines they drew on their maps. Religious zealots chasing the full consequences of extreme hate and fear, governments deciding they needed something another nation possessed and sending their people to take it by force. Force that made it clear that her world's survival was more a miracle than its destruction. The understanding broke her. Rylan stepped close and pulled her into his arms. I'm sorry, he said. Why fight them then? What sobbed? To give the world a chance to choose for themselves. Chapter 74. Qualified Teachers. You made a battle training camp, huh? Orla asked dryly. I've never taught children before, Gouette admitted, folding her arms across her chest. What was I supposed to do? Orla shrugged. They're strange. They show all of the signs of advanced students, but they don't understand how they are doing any of it. My teacher once asked me to describe breathing to a tree, Gouette said. I never really thought about it until now. I can tell them to take a deep breath, but explaining how to chase the feeling that climbs your spine, spills down your arms, and feels like it's peeling your body apart, she grimaced. That's harder. Orla's eyes widened slightly. Is that what it's like for you? Gouette shrugged. More or less. Orla turned, looking down the hall where the students worked with new instructors. After a moment, she sighed. For me, it's more like goosebumps on a warm day. I feel cold deep in me. No matter the temperature, no matter what I'm doing, the cold presses in. Gouette glanced at her. And that's just the beginning, though. How do I teach them to shape those sensations? Chase what is going to make them afraid, to trace patterns in themselves, ripples of that cold in waves like letters. Orla laughed softly. I see why you didn't choose a gentler path, she admitted. She shifted her weight. It's nothing like that for me. It's closer to adjusting the temperature in my body and skin in precise ways. Some say it's an entirely new sense, one with its own language and meaning, individual to everyone. So we're left telling students to learn what the colors smell like, and all before they have eyes to see or begin to understand. Gouette grinned. Is that why people with synesthesia are so often prodigies? That's a debate for scholars, Orla said. I never was overly academic. Gouette raised an eyebrow. I assumed judges were engineers or philosophers. We only have to prove competence, Orla replied, and pass tests of judgment. What is a test of judgment? Gouette asked. Life, Orla replied simply, but reacted to unusually. She gestured down the hall, and they began to walk together. The first test usually comes in childhood, Orla continued, something that forces us to choose. She hesitated. A girl in my class bullied my friends. I organized the whole class against her, made her an outcast. Every word of hatred or hurt she spat was returned to her in a flood from every angle. A dozen children reflecting the harm of one hurt kid. Who had tilted her head. That sounds heroic. Orla looked at her. You wouldn't make a good judge. When the teachers found out, they gave me my first test. I had to write a full report. What had happened, what I did, why I did it, and the consequences, and how I would change it if I had to do it again. Why change anything? Gouette asked. Because I learned that the girl had lost her mother, Orla said quietly. Her father was distant. She was 6. She came home to empty rooms, took care of herself when she should have been playing. She glanced over as they walked. All I had done is made a sad girl's life worse. Gouette shrugged. Actions have consequences. They do, Orla agreed, but intent doesn't erase harm. I punished pain with more pain. My teachers asked me if I was any better than her. You were, Gouette insisted. You protected your friends, defended them. The actions I took were worse, Orla admitted. She acted from a place of hurt. I recruited others to amplify that pain. But you were just a child. That doesn't undo the outcome. Orla stopped walking and turned towards Gouette. If we always answer pain with pain, the world never heals. She continued walking. Gouette followed. My assignment was to make it right, Orla said. A 6-year-old trying to help another broken 6-year-old. I was proud of what I did, proud of what it made me. She smiled. We became friends, nearly family in our bond. Gouette stared at the floor. Her certainty was dissolving into something heavier. That girl helped shape who I became. Phyllis said. I'll always be grateful for that. She changed the subject gently. Why didn't you take the trials when Rylan did? Brett stopped short, pausing. The trials? Yes, he has been a first circle judge of Sanctuary for over a century. Brett blinked. He never told me. She shifted uncomfortably. I didn't know him yet. Barely a century old myself. Carla squeezed her shoulder. I'm sorry, I didn't realize you didn't know. Brett looked away. I chose trust over understanding. He told me everything when I asked. Orla continued to walk in silence. They completed 2 long spans back to camp, enough distance to steady their thoughts before returning to be the mentors that they needed to be. Chapter 75: Conscience and Consequence. What had you focus on the physical aspects of training? Rylan said, standing motionless before the gathered students and the judges that he had brought back from Sanctuary, nearly to the exclusion of everything else. He paused, clearly weighing his words. We did not anticipate the consequences of that choice. He shook his head once, a small gesture of frustration and accountability. I did not bring you here to make you warriors, Rylan continued, his voice steadier now. I brought you here to teach you what you call magic, to give you, in a matter of months, an understanding that normally takes lifetimes, to give you the tools and understanding you need to be teachers for the other adepts of Earth. He inhaled slowly, grounding himself before continuing. These trainers, he said, gesturing to the figures standing behind him, are highly respected members of society, centuries beyond your own. The judges wore no uniform, no shared colors or sigils. They were dressed as individuals: pants, skirts, layered fabrics, bare arms, high collars, flowing sleeves. Skin tones ranged from human to impossible hues. Some eyes glimmered faintly with inner light. Hair fell naturally, braided, floating, or shaped into styles that seemed to defy gravity itself. They looked unreal, not armored, not threatening, a cacophony of individuals. They will work with each of you individually and in groups to explain how your abilities function, what essence is, how your body gathers it, generates it, stores it, and ultimately shapes it into something purposeful and refined. Rylan continued. A whisper started to form among the students. Rylan caught it instantly. His gaze snapped to the offender, sharp enough to freeze the sound in their throat. We do not expect you to face the Shapers at all, he said, lowering his voice slightly. They are more powerful, more established, and more well trained than any of you can imagine. Their intention is not conquest in the way your histories describe it. They mean to break your world systemically and claim what remains once the damage is complete. The weight of that settled heavily. Wet, Orla and I will stand against them if we must. But our goal is not war. Our goal is to alter outcomes, to deny them the result they expect. He let the silence breathe. If you have questions, we will answer them about the Shapers, about Earth, about our plans, about what comes next. His eyes moved across the group. Ask wisely. If we weren't meant to fight, Vince muttered to Nina beside him, why did he spend so much time getting hurt? Rylan's eyes shifted immediately. He didn't raise his voice. You are different from most adepts, he said. Problematic in a very specific way. You understand almost nothing about the power, what it is, how it works, what it costs, and yet you wield it far more than most adepts or even trained professionals ever will. Vince stiffened. You're toddlers behind the wheel of automobiles, Rylan continued calmly. You don't know what the machine is. You don't know what speed does. You don't understand momentum. And yet you find yourselves hurtling through crowded hallways with your foot already on the accelerator. Duet wasn't turning you into warriors. She was trying to give you friction, something real enough to stop you from tearing yourselves apart before you ever understood what you were doing. Vince stood abruptly. What happens if we say no? He called out, forcing confidence into his voice. What if we don't want to help you with your plan? Ryan exhaled slowly. You're not here to help me with my plans, he said. You're here to help Earth, your friends, your families, the people who will wake up one day very soon and realize that the rules that they have lived under no longer apply. His gaze moved across the room, not lingering too long on any one face. Power is coming, whether you accept it or not. People will panic. Governments will fracture. Old systems will fail under the weight of things they are never designed to carry. Earth needs translators, teachers, stabilizers, people who can say, I survived this, I learned, and you can too. Where will you be? Liz demanded, finally finding her voice. Rylan met her eyes without flinching. Ideally, beside you. But the ideal outcome is rarely the one that history chooses. Why us? Vince pressed, louder now, a little anger bleeding through his voice. Rylan nodded once as if he expected the question. Because you are statistically the least likely to break. Stable homes, enough food, enough safety, parents, siblings, support systems. You were raised with the highest odds of becoming functional adults instead of just survivors. I chose you because you weren't already drowning, Alan continued. You had stability, space to grow into yourselves before the world demanded everything from you. I didn't choose you based on identity or blood. I chose you based on likelihood, on who would carry power without being consumed by it. Earth doesn't need more desperate gods. It needs people capable of restraint, empathy, and responsibility. Because you are all more likely to be people of conscience and consequence. Silence followed. Sarah, small and barely over 5 feet tall, brown hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, let out a long, shaky breath. The sound carried further than it should have in the quiet. This is nothing like the books, she said in a whisper. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then someone laughed, nervous at first. Another followed. Even Rylan let out a quiet chuckle before shaking his head. No, he agreed. It isn't. This is not a story. He straightened, the humor fading, but something gentler replacing it. I hoped for 100 of you. I hoped to give Earth more time, more teachers, more buffers against what is coming. I have failed in that. He paused, choosing his next words more carefully. But when we're finished, you will understand more than anyone else on your world. You will be more capable, more informed, more prepared than any leaders, generals, or institution Earth can offer. His smile was small and tired, but sincere. That's the only gift I could manage, short of saving the world. So, Mina said, arms crossed, tone familiar and sharp. When do we actually start learning then? Wet shot a glare, sharp enough to cut glass. Rylan, however, laughed, this time genuinely. You can start now. He gestured around at the children from Earth, fully aware they were too young to know or understand what he was about to tell them. But all of you, please know that you will become important people. In your world, extremely important. People will revere and idolize you for your power, for your knowledge, for the fate that guided you to me. I will do whatever I can to prepare you and make you ready for that responsibility. I'll thank you for your part now, as it's likely to be a thankless task. When he finished, he looked over the kids again, offered them a tired smile. They may not understand his words fully, but they would understand in time, and he would do everything that he could for them to make their task possible. Chapter 76. Worldwide. Jake worked himself past the edge of exhaustion, trying to understand what was happening. What he found were fragments, partial alerts, clipped statements, half denials so vague they could have meant anything or nothing at all. The more he pushed, the less coherent the picture became. Eventually, his concentration failed him completely. He cried without quite realizing it, slumped sideways on the living room couch, and fell asleep as if he had been pulled under. Stephanie and Emily slept too, their interest dulled by the lack of answers. They had even teased him earlier for losing focus on their recruitment efforts, but Jake couldn't let this go. Something had happened, and he could feel it. Even asleep, his mind worked. His dreams were crowded with journalists, government officials, and conspiracy theorists clawing at scraps of information. Vultures circling a carcass sealed beneath layers of steel. Every voice wanted clarity. None of them had it. The dream widened, spreading until it felt like he was going to glimpse everyone on Earth at once. Millions of minds straining in the same direction. Then the motion slowed. Jake found himself on a ship. It reminded him of one of those shows his family used to watch. Captains, aliens, starfields, but this felt heavier, more real, less story, more machine. Some of the people looked human, others absolutely did not. They moved with purpose. Animals, insects, machines, things that were almost human but wrong in subtle ways. They conducted experiments, took measurements, reviewed data, spoke in clipped exchanges that sounded practiced and efficient. This wasn't exploration, this was administration. The bridge held a dozen figures working with intense focus. Rylan? A woman's voice said. She stood abruptly from one of the tables, holographic imagery hovering above it, and stared directly at Jake. Her voice drew attention. Several others glanced toward him and then back to their work, clearly seeing nothing at all. Only she was looking at him. You shouldn't be able to use sight here, she said, her expression shifting from curiosity to concern. Jake tried to pull away, tried to look somewhere else. He couldn't. He didn't feel trapped exactly, more called, as if this was exactly where he was supposed to be. The woman's hair was braided, neatly back, dark patterns stitched into the shoulders of her loose uniform. She looked about a decade older than him, composed, sharp. The crease of her brow somehow made her even more striking. Are we under investigation? She continued, or review? Behind her, the bridge moved faster now. Voices sharpened, displays flickered. Shaper resonance detected, ma'am, someone reported from another console. Her eyes narrowed. You will submit a full report explaining why you're wasting time spying on my bridge, she said coldly. Recall immediately. Report to Linamos 5, Solvenrian. Darkness swallowed everything. Jake woke. The living room faintly lit by the early morning sun. His heart raced. The dream felt wrong. He rubbed his eyes and went to the kitchen. Drank some orange juice straight from the jug, trying to shake the feeling. Nothing. Then he froze. The refrigerator door hung open as his focus snapped onto a stranger in a fluorescent lit room, studying photographs spread across a desk. Jake recognized two of the faces immediately. They had been on the ship in his dream. His breath caught. He set the juice back carefully and leaned into the image. The photograph sharpened. The room clarified. This wasn't imagination. It wasn't a dream. Just to be certain, he pinched his forearm and shut the fridge, focusing on the way each action felt, each sensation. They, like his sight, were very real. He returned to the couch. Stephanie and Emily were still asleep in separate rooms. He pushed them from his thoughts and followed the thread. In an instant, he was back on the bridge. The woman and the man from the photographs were speaking quietly at a workstation. Jake wanted to listen, but hesitated. She had seen him once. She might see him again. He still wasn't certain if the dream had been real or if it was just something that he had imagined. So he pulled back. He accelerated outward, faster than thought, until the ship became a shape and then a structure. It wasn't a ship at all. It was an industrial complex suspended impossibly in the sky. And Jake knew exactly where it was. He followed invisible lines like a mapping app no one had taught him how to use. A road, a town, name surfaced effortlessly. He reached for his phone and then stopped. Instead, he grabbed the tablet from the coffee table. The interface fought him. He searched for a map, tried to download one, and hit a password prompt. Swearing under his breath, he marched into Emily's room and shook her awake. Emily, he said urgently, I need you to look up a city. Can't this wait? She groaned, batting his hands away. No, it can't wait. She sighed and reluctantly sat up, grabbing her phone from the nightstand. Jake paced, his attention split, half anchored miles away from the complex, careful to stay distant enough not to be noticed. Okay, Emily said groggily. What am I looking for? New Pine Creek, Jake said. She typed, scrolled. It's a tiny town. It's a tiny town on the California-Oregon border, Jake. I think there are aliens there, Jake said. Emily blinked at him. Are you okay? Yes, he said too quickly. Very okay. I can see them. She rubbed her face. You need to get some sleep. I slept, Jake said, almost vibrating. There are aliens on Earth, Emily. Chapter 77, Perspective. Vince had worked with several of the judges by now. His ability to see and map the world around him was so innate that it took him years to realize not everyone experienced reality the same way he did. For most of his life, he assumed everyone carried an extra sense, some quiet internal map they referenced without thinking. When he finally understood that wasn't true, he turned to books, self-help, history, biographies, philosophy. None of those helped. Eventually, he turned to a friend. They hadn't been cruel, not exactly, but the casual dismissal of what Vince tried to explain, the way they brushed it off as imagination or exaggeration left him feeling exposed and embarrassed, guilty even, ashamed enough that he promised himself he would never talk about it again. Then he discovered comic books. Browsing a bookstore one afternoon, he picked up a thick, full-color X-Men volume. The school, the powers, the feeling of being different and dangerous and misunderstood, training not just to survive, but to be useful, to be good, it all clicked. From then on, his life became a quiet montage of consumption and discipline. He read obsessively, trained privately, tested himself in subtle ways no one else noticed. Always with the same hope burning under everything, that one day he might be like the heroes in those pages. That hope took root before he was even a teenager. For 15 years he practiced, tested, explored. He refined his awareness, pushed his limits, tried to be careful, tried to be worthy. And then Bouette found him in the woods and dismantled him in hours. She stalked him effortlessly, cornered him without urgency, proved without cruelty that everything he thought was mastery had been shallow, easy, and safe. The shame came roaring back. And then there was Rylan, sitting with him, listening to him talk about magic the way people talk about electricity or plumbing as infrastructure, not wonder, shifted something fundamental. Rylan didn't teach him so much as confirm what Vince always suspected. The stories were wrong. Magic was real, but it wasn't storybook real. It wouldn't match the pages of his comics. Each person had a gift, yes, but the scope was wildly uneven. Some people could throw fire like the comics promised. Others had talents so narrow they barely registered. Resistance to heat, immunity to certain poisons, specific poisons, the ability to sense truth in tone or patterns in crowds, or danger just before it arrived. Useful sometimes, trivial often, powerful only in the right hands and circumstances. It reminded Vince of the non-magical world, of kids who could talk to anyone effortlessly, math prodigies, people who just got things. From the outside, it looked impossible. Once you learned it, it looked inevitable. Only here, inside the wells, did Vince finally see what he had been missing. His days became brutal cycles of suspicion and testing, feeling something, chasing it, failing, trying again. For years he had done this alone. Now he was surrounded by people who understood his questions and answered them without mysticism. At the highest levels, they said, attunement was about frequency, resonance, energy that aligned with you, whether you understood it or not. Practically, it was simpler. It was chasing a feeling, leaning into its shape, giving it meaning, practicing until those meanings became instinct. Like any talent, no one started exceptional. Talent mattered, but patience and obsession mattered more. Vince hated cooking. Always had. He burned water. Couldn't tell spices apart by flavor or smell. Now he understood that if he cooked for years, he might eventually make something decent, but only if he understood what ingredients he had. Ramen, potatoes, and beans only went so far. Magic was the same. The judges explained ingredients patiently, adapting explanations to each student. Cook, the fuel, raw essence in blood and bone, or the ability to shape it, bend it, and decide what it did and how to use it. Vince resonated at 60 billion cycles per second and was attuned to the air. It didn't make sense. He had never thought about breathing. None of his abilities felt air-like. The judges told him that that didn't matter. Then they described what it felt like when they worked, and everything clicked. While they talked, Vince chased those sensations. The cavern answered him. Wind pulled through the halls. A sudden forceful breeze washed over everyone, shocking them. When he trained with Orla, she set a candle between them. Put it out, she said simply. He blasted it with gusts, failed over and over. After an hour, she asked him why he was trying to push the air. Why wouldn't I? He asked, indignant, and then he stopped and thought. He tried again. Air rushed away from the flame. It flared violently, then guttered. Finally, With barely any motion at all, the candle died. Vince couldn't explain how he'd done it. There was no chain of logic. It was just an internal knowing. Again, Orla said calmly, and so he did it again. She lit the candle without tools. He extinguished it. After an hour, he was beyond exhaustion. His mind felt bruised, a deep, aching soreness he'd never experienced before. Take a break, Orla said, smiling at last. Vince tried to answer, couldn't. He nodded and wandered to his bunk, pride and exhaustion tangled together as he fell into a deep sleep. Chapter 78, Setbacks. Commander, I've been summoned to council, Venrian reported the moment his eyes finished scanning the message on his console. Laura didn't respond. She was buried in work, fingers moving across displays with mechanical precision. When the words finally landed, she shook her head and looked up at him sharply. No. Venrian hesitated and then straightened. Apologies, ma'am. It's urgent. Directly from High Council chambers. No, Mora repeated, her glare hardening. You're needed here. We're in the opening phases of the fastest incursion in Shaper history. What could possibly be more important than that? Venrian only shrugged, helpless. Mora pulled the message onto her own console and scrolled. Confusion gave way to a slow, simmering scowl as she read. When her eyes finally stopped moving, she exhaled through her nose. Go, she said flatly. Return as quickly as you can. Yes, ma'am. Venrian saluted and left without another word. Mora turned back to her work. There was more than enough to occupy her for months, and only a fraction of that time to complete it. Losing Venrian, her second, her anchor, felt unforgivable. Worse, it wasn't something she could argue. Complaining or appearing before a council herself would only cost her more time. Still, the absence gnawed at her. She found herself rereading reports, catching small errors, correcting mistakes she wouldn't normally make. Her irritation grew until a private message flared on her display. She opened it. Mora, send Selfish to Sanctuary Command. There has been an event in Well 7. She is being brought on board under my supervision, Venrian. Mora clenched her jaw hard enough to make it ache. She closed the message and looked across the bridge to the young woman who had been pulled into the deepest currents of the Shaper power structure. Faster than was reasonable, faster than was safe. Mora had helped build the Shapers from doctrine and blood. She had written the principles they now lived by. Even she had been denied secrets for decades as the group outgrew any single person's control. Now, there were so many secrets and backroom dealings she could barely track half of them. And Selfish walked through doors Mora had battered down with her own hands. Selfish, Mora called, her voice controlled but carrying unmistakable authority. Report to Sanctuary Command immediately. Selfish looked up, startled. Her mouth fell open. Her mind raced through every possible misstep. Every imagined failure. She found none. She wondered if she was about to be reprimanded for something she didn't even know she had done. Acolyte Selfish, Mora repeated sharper. Now. Yeah, yes, Commander. Selfish nodded, words tripping over themselves. Her body moved slower than her thoughts, as though she were wading through something thick and resistant. Be quick, Mora called after her. I need you back here as soon as possible. She paused and then added, and bring Venrian with you when you return. Selfish disappeared through the hatch. Mora drew a long breath and surveyed the bridge. Too many eyes were on her, on the door. She rolled her shoulders once and snapped, back to work. Then she turned back to her console and led by example, burying herself in numbers, projections, and plans that no longer felt quite as solid as they had an hour ago. Chapter 79, Sidetracked. Jake, you've gotten off task, Emily said aloud. Jake looked over at her with open hostility. Stephanie watched the exchange, feeling increasingly untethered from whatever plan they were supposed to have. She liked Jake and Emily well enough. She even loved the idea of what they might become, of what their lives could turn into. Believing in powers had been easy. Believing in magic had been easy. Believing in this was harder. Emily was cautious to the point of paralysis. Jake was brilliant and distracted in equal measure. Stephanie didn't understand why it mattered that there were aliens on Earth. She didn't understand why they weren't finding others like themselves. She didn't understand why so much time was being wasted. Jake stood abruptly and headed to the door. Fine, let's go. Let's do anything else. Emily rolled her eyes. Jake, we should be careful. We've been so careful we're becoming boring, Jake groaned. Stephanie seized the moment. She grabbed a light sweater she thought looked cute and followed Jake to the door, offering him an encouraging grin. Emily glared at her. It's time to do something, Stephanie said, meeting Emily's stare head on, frustration sharpening her tone. Emily considered trying to stop them. She could feel the moment slipping away. Instead, she rose slowly inside. I'm driving. Jake and Stephanie rushed outside before she could reconsider. Piled into Jerome's truck. Jake and Stephanie argued briefly before settling the back seat with a quick game of rock, paper, scissors. Jake lost and complained loudly as he squeezed himself into the cramped space. Where to? Emily asked as she started the engine. I see 3 people at the mall, Jake said hopefully. No, Emily replied immediately. Not somewhere public. Give me an address, a home, an apartment, anything else. Jake rattled one off, then repeated it twice as Emily entered it into the GPS. I can give directions, Jake offered. No, this will be better. Stephanie bounced slightly in her seat, excitement bubbling over now that they were moving. She twisted around to face Jake. Tell me more about the aliens? Jake lit up instantly. I don't think they're from space, he said, but they're definitely not human. Well, some of them are, just not any races I recognize. There are bugs and tiny people and monsters, lions, fish-looking things. One guy looks like a deer but with furry hands. His words tumbled over each other. There's this huge jellyfish thing floating in a tank in the middle of the ship. It has a massive screen around it, but it's always blue, like when a computer freezes. Emily caught herself smiling. He'd said all of this before, but something about being out of the house made it feel lighter. She glanced at Stephanie and caught her grinning just as wide as she was. They have an actual spaceship, Jake continued, gesturing wildly. Hundreds of people and creatures working like it's normal. Holograms, lasers, it's crazy. Emily waited for him to take a breath before interrupting. What about the person we're going to see? Jake hesitated. He's kind of a bully, dresses in black leather, spikes. I don't know if he's a mage. But you think he might be, right? Stephanie asked. Maybe. Powers aren't obvious. People don't go around wielding them like you see in comics. But you've seen people use them, Stephanie pressed. Emily flinched, despite herself. Jake thought. At least once, twice? And that was mostly luck. So we need a little luck, Stephanie said lightly. A lot of it, Jake replied, his eyes flickering to her. Don't we always? Jake, Emily said quietly. The air in the truck cooled. Silence crept in. Minutes later, Emily parked outside a rundown, pay-by-the-week apartment complex, hotel. Peeling paint, trash, a shopping cart stuffed with debris. Stephanie stared, open-mouthed. We're not going in here. Emily nodded. We are. Jake's shoulders lifted. We are? We can't keep listening to your alien stories forever, Emily said, opening the door. We have to try something. Stephanie grabbed Emily's arm. Are you sure? Emily looked around once more, then pulled it free. Let's see if you're as lucky as you think you are. Move first, and quickly, rushing towards the door of the apartment. Emily, behind him, gasped. Stephanie froze beside her. Jake? Emily said urgently. What? He snapped, stopping and turning around. He saw them glowing. Not a solid light, but a flowing color. Greens, purples, and reds, like the aurora borealis, curling around their bodies. They stared at one another in stunned silence. Emily scanned the lot. No one was watching. We should go, she said. No, Jake replied instantly, already moving for the door again. Stephanie followed without hesitation. Emily wanted to shout, wanted to stop them. Instead, she watched as Jake opened the unlocked door and stepped inside. Chapter 80, Worse Than Useless. I guess I thought it would be more magical, Nina said quietly. It was never going to be like the stories, Mamar replied without hesitation. They walked side by side through the halls once more. Mamar was a judge whose specialty was healing, one of the best in Sanctuary, according to the others. Nina believed that. If anything, she already felt she surpassed him in some ways. though she didn't know what to do with that realization. She had learned that she could cure hangovers in high school. From there, she noticed that injuries healed faster around her, subtly at first, then unmistakably. She became a trauma nurse in an ICU. She had helped save hundreds, maybe thousands of patients simply by checking charts and standing quietly at their bedside. Doctors would say they didn't think someone would make it. Nina would linger anyway, and sometimes nerves regrew. Sometimes paralysis softened. Sometimes bodies refused to give up. Other hospitals noticed. Doctors visited. No one ever suspected a nurse with an impossible gift. Not in a modern hospital. Not in a world that pretended magic didn't exist. She had never believed she was powerful, only useful. That belief followed her here. I always assumed I was barely a novice, Nina admitted, that one day I'd be able to close wounds, regrow tissue, heal something terrible in moments. Umar smiled sympathetically. Cellular recovery has limits, thousands of them. He explained those limits in detail. Again, he told her her gift was invaluable. Again, he assured her she was progressing well. Again, the only concrete advice he had managed to offer was that she could assist the trainees with muscle recovery, speed adaptation, increase density, help them train harder, be better. After weeks of effort, Nina saw no difference at all. So, she said finally, you're saying I'll never heal someone quickly. That depends entirely on how you define quickly, Umar said, suddenly bright, and how long you're willing to watch. Nina groaned and rubbed her face. Umar wasn't fat, but he wasn't thin either. He looked like every kindly father stereotype she could think of. His beard was always neat, his smile eternal, his optimism relentless. Oh, so you're being too hard on yourself, he continued. This is one of the most profound gifts a healer can have. On any world, in any universe, you will always be valued. Nina exhaled sharply. She knew he wasn't wrong, but knowing didn't help. Aaron could tear lightning from the air. Liz could step through reality as if it were fog. Even the others had abilities that felt like magic. Nina was still bound by flesh, by time, by limits. You could speak to Vouette, Momar offered gently. Her ability to shape her own body aligns closely with yours. She could guide you. I have, Nina said, tired. She says it would take years, decades maybe, just to make small changes. Earlier begun is earlier done, Lamar said cheerfully. Nina stopped walking and turned to him. Stop that. Stop what? He asked, genuinely confused. Stop being so goddamn positive all the time. Lamar startled, then shrank back slightly. Sorry. No, Nina sighed. Don't be sorry either. I'm just disappointed. I don't understand why, he said, smiling again despite himself. There are Tor who would kill for your mastery. People who've trained for generations and can't do a fraction of what you already can. Her shoulders sagged as guilt joined the disappointment. I think, Lamar began. Please, Nina interrupted softly. Just let me walk in peace for a minute. Lamar nodded and turned back towards the camp hesitantly. Nina lingered, watching him go. Far down the hall, Aaron was perched on a glowing crystal, eyes closed, power humming quietly around him. He wasn't who she thought he was. He was becoming something else entirely, and she envied that. She turned away. Yes, I thought, she whispered to no one. I'd have the power that might impress even him.
Thank you for listening to 10,000 Worlds, written and read by Weston Gill. That's me. I first publish each chapter on my YouTube channel at Venture Saga. If you're interested in skipping ahead and beating the podcast crowd, I recommend checking out my YouTube and subscribing. I also post other short stories there. Thank you.